This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about this particular nested switch cases here, and today we'll understand the while loops here. So, how exactly this particular while loops like? It's like a iteration statements we are going to call. So, inside this particular iteration statements here, we have a while, do while, as well as for loop. So, first we'll start with the while loop here, and so for loop we already identified in the previous example. So basically, what exactly the iteration statements will do here, and this iteration statement will try to loop the loop. It will try to repeat multiple values. So based on the condition will fail here. Okay. So if you check any iteration statement, it will try to work on the condition here. If the condition is fail, it will stop. Otherwise, until the condition fail, it will try to repeat the loop multiple times here. Okay. So we'll see how this particular while loop is going to work. So to understand this particular while loop here, so what is the syntax we need to understand first here? So basically, this is a keyword. Okay, and here we need to add condition. Getting the point? So here we need to add a condition. If this particular condition will fail, what happens here? It will come out of this particular while loop. So otherwise, now what happens internally? It will keep on executing the statements. How many statements we are going to write here? Getting the point? Because while is also one of the iteration statement. Iteration statement is nothing but it's keep on repeating the while loop multiple times here. So until this particular condition will fail here. So this is very important here. So this is the keyword we are going to use while, and here we need to write the condition. So this particular condition will give you the information. So how many times, getting the point? How many times this particular loop we need to repeat. So this it's going to identified by the this particular condition here. Okay, and this is the body of the while loop here. So what the statements we want to execute once this particular condition is satisfied. So those statements we are going to write here. Getting the point? This is important, we need to understand here. So let's have a simple example on this while how it is going to work. Let me go back to our project explorer and where we are creating. So inside this particular code 07, we come up with the classes here. And what is the name we can come up with this? So in something like while test. Getting the point. So while test, I'm trying to enable the main method. And now observe. So this is the main method is created. And now what I'm doing it, I'm trying to create come up with the int n is equals to 10. Int n is equals to 10. So just I'm trying to initializing the n value. After initializing, now what I'm doing it, I come up with this particular while loop, and this particular while, observe carefully, n greater than 0. N greater than 0. So see the condition how it is working internally. This is important here. If the n value greater than 0, if this particular n value greater than 0, so how many times this particular n value is greater than 0, it will keep on running the this particular same while loop here. Okay. So if you see what I will do, simply I will print this value, something just for understanding I'm writing, tick value, and n I'm giving. Now you can see this particular loop, if you observe carefully, this particular loop will repeat multiple times. It's not going to stop here because here every time the condition is satisfying here. Now you can see here, observe carefully, is keep on running here. Getting the point? So this particular value is printing 10 value, and the same it's trying to repeat multiple times here. Now you can see still it is running. So it is not stopping here. Why it is not stopping here? Because whatever the condition we provided, the condition still it is satisfying here. But here, this is not the correct way here. If you see how many times this particular loop is repeated here. So we cannot imagine around more than 100 times this particular loop is repeated here, right? But what we need to understand here. So whenever we are defining this particular loop here, we come up with the one condition. If the n value greater than 0, so it will enter into this statement. It will keep on print this statement. But here we need to understand how many times this particular loop will repeat. So that is also very important here. Getting the point? How many times we want to repeat this particular loop, that is also we need to provide the value. But how we can provide the value? So for example, if I'm trying to decrease this particular n value, if I'm trying to decrease this particular n value, now think about this loop here. How many times this particular loop will repeat here? How many times this particular loop will repeat here? So this is important here. Getting the point? So this is we need to understand whenever we are trying to work with this particular while loop here. So this particular condition, it will fail after certain iterations complete here. This is very important here. But the previous example, what happening here? It keep on running here. It is not failing the condition here. Still the condition is satisfied here until it's coming multiple times this particular value of printing. But if you observe carefully, if I'm going to run the same example one more time, how many times this particular loop is repeating? Now observe 10 to 1. After 1, it is not printing here. Getting the point? After 1, this particular loop is the particular loop condition is fail and it will come out of this particular while loop. Getting the point? This is very important here. Now, this entire while loop is going to work on this particular condition. This condition, whenever we are making this particular condition, so we need to think how many, after how many iteration we need to complete. So we need to stop this particular loop here. We need to, the condition should fail here. Once the condition should fail here, what happens internally? It will come out of this particular while loop here. Okay, so this is important here. So this is all about the simple example on the while loop here. Basically, what I will do, what is doing exactly, every iteration, the n value is checking and it is printing the value, and later the n values is decreasing, and again, whatever the n values decrease here is keep on checking the condition, and if the condition is satisfied, it is enter into this particular block. Otherwise, it will come out of this particular while block here. Okay, and one more example I want to provide here. Observe here. This is also important example here. I'm trying to comment out this particular basic example while loop, and now int I is equals to 100 I'm providing, and j is equals to 200 I'm providing. Okay, so after this, again I'm trying to come up with the same while loop here, and now if you observe plus plus I in the point, plus plus I less than minus minus j. So this is the condition. This is the particular condition I'm providing. And now what I will do, here I will print the I and j value here. Here I will print I and j value. Okay, now if you see what happens here, this particular loop, what happens internally. So you can see at the condition level only we are making this particular iteration like increment, as well as we are decreasing this particular j value here. But in the previous example, what we did here, we come up with a normal condition, and in the while loop body, we are trying to decreasing the value. But this is the different example. At the condition level only, we are increasing or decreasing the value. Okay, so now you can run this particular example. So if we come up with a print statement here. Let me use the println. It's keep on printing on the same line, so we could not understand what is the values. Now you can see, observe carefully, I value, so initially is increased 101 and j value 199. Same 102, 198. It's keep on, I value is increasing and j value decreasing. But when this particular condition is failed, when this particular condition is failed, now you can think this particular I value. So what is the I value right now? 149. And what about this particular j value? 151. And now why the after one more statement is not printed here? So if you think about this, what happens internally? So if the I value is increased here, the I value will become 150, and 150 less than, what is the J value? So this J value will decrease the one value. So again, this is also will become 150. So 150 less than 150, what happens internally? This particular condition will not satisfied here. Getting the point? This particular condition will not satisfied. When this particular values are when these particular values are satisfied this particular condition, it will come out of the while loop here. Getting the point? So everything we provided at the condition level, like incrementing the value or decrementing the value, as well as the proper condition, the three information we provided at the condition level here. So this is the one more example here. This is the one more example for this particular while loop here. Okay. So any questions? So any
Sir,
questions regarding this?
sir, I have a question. So, while condition, sometimes like when you do not provide like a stop for it, it is continuously printing, right? So, is that
Yes.
scenario used in real time at all?
No, no, no. We are not going to use. See, most
Okay.
of the time we'll come up with the conditions based on it. If you are not adding any, like if we don't have a proper condition, so unnecessarily we are increasing the memory size. Because if the loop is repeating multiple times, automatically the memory also will increase here. So real-time applications is very important. How much we can reduce the memory, so that's very important here. Okay. So any other questions? Okay. Now observe. So one more simple example I want to provide. Here I'm not adding this particular body. Here I'm not adding any body here. So here I want to print this particular I and j value. Getting the part? I'm not using any body. The same example I'm trying to run here. Observe carefully what happens now. So you can see I value 150 we are getting and j value we are waiting 150. So internally this while is repeated. Getting the point? This particular while only repeated here because we did not come up with any body here. If we have any body, it will try to execute the statements. But right now, I come up with a semicolon. Semicolon basically what it will do, it will try to share the information to the compiler. This is the end of the line. Getting the point? This is the end of the line here. So if it is end of the line, compiler cannot understand the while does not have a body here. Right. So once it is does not have a body, internally this while itself is repeated multiple times. The while loop is itself it's repeated multiple times, and once a condition will fail, it's trying to print the line number 13 here. So we now we understand here and the which value the conditions are failed, like in the which value of this particular I and j the condition is failed here. So that is we need to understand I value 150 and j value 150. At 150 level, this particular loop is terminated here. Okay, so this is I want to provide the one more example here, and now you can see what happens. One more example. So here I want to comment on this into a is equals to 10 I'm having and b is equals to 20. So whenever I'm trying to provide a equal and b equal to 10 and 20 values here, and now again I want to use the same while loop, and here a greater than, sorry, a greater than b. Getting the pen. So what happens here? If I'm going to write this print statement here, this particular print statement will print here. Please think and let me know. So what happens here? In the line number 15 while loop, what happens internally here?
Here also we are not providing body.
Okay. If I'm not providing the body, what is another option? So if you write this particular semicolon, it will not look up with this line. But I'm not giving any semicolon here. Now what happens here?
It will fail because A value is less than B. It will not work.
Okay, if you run this, nothing. Getting the point. So in the initial only, this particular while loop is coming out of the whatever the line number 15 we declare here. Okay. So but if you see A less than B, now understand here how many times this particular loop will repeat. It's keep on repeating here. So now here what we need to understand here, even I'm not whenever I'm not adding this semicolon here, what happens internally, it will try to look up the single line here. So this is we already discussed in the earlier sections here. So when we want to execute the multiple lines, we should come up with a block of statements here. Otherwise we can define the single line statement here. This particular single line statements will work in even in the while loop also, but only for this particular current example, we are not increasing or decreasing the value. So because of this particular statement, whatever the statement we define, it's keep on printing the here. Getting the point. Now you can see, so it's printed around more than 10 times here. More than 10 times this particular statement is printed. But here, when we want to stop this loop, we should come up with some condition, the proper condition here. Once a certain operations are completed, we should stop our loop here. Okay, but only we need to understand whenever we are having the single line of statement here, no need to write the block of code here. Like the block of code, no need to write. We can come up with a single statement here. The single statement will also will execute it here. Okay, so this is I want to share this particular one more example. So any questions on regarding this particular while loop? Okay, so we'll try to execute the do while loop because these are all the different example we identified in the while loop here. Now we'll move on to the do while loop here. So first we'll understand the do while loop syntax here. So later we get the simple example here. Observe carefully what exactly the do while will do here. And so this is the syntax we are going to follow for do while loop. This is the do I'm opening, and here I'm trying to write the body of statement here, or we can come up with the body of loop here. And after completion of this particular do, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to check this particular condition here. Getting the point? Here I'm trying to check the condition. This is important here. And here we'll come up with a semicolon. After this particular value, I'm going to come up with a semicolon. So now you can think here. So this is the do statement. Inside the do, we come up with the body of the loop here, and the while loop, the while loop, we are writing end of this particular do, and we are making the condition. So here we are not enabling the body of this particular while loop. Just we come up with a semicolon. So whenever we are coming with a semicolon, now what happens internally? It will repeat to this. Getting the point? So first time, at the first time here, we don't have any condition. So it will give you the option for first time without checking any condition. Whatever the body we are going to write here, the particular body will execute here. Getting the point? After execution of this particular body first time, now what happening internally? It's going to check the condition. If this particular condition is satisfied, if the condition is written as true, then only it will keep on the second iteration. It will move on to the second iteration. So otherwise it will come out of the whatever the next line we are going to write here. Getting the point. This is important. We need to understand only the difference between do while. So do while basically it will give you the first option to execute without checking any condition. From the second iteration, it will look up the condition. So based on the condition satisfied here, it will keep on repeating the loop one multiple times here. Okay. So this is only the difference between do while and while statement here. So let me come up with a simple example how exactly it's going to work here. So here I'm trying to come up with a do while, and inside this particular do while here, now what I'm doing here, again the same example what we discussed in the previous example, I'm going to write the same one here, but only the difference here, inside the do I'm going to come up with a println statement here. Now observe, so this is the particular tick value I'm trying to write here, and after n, now what I will do, I'm going to decrease the n value, and here what is the condition we can make it, the same condition whatever we used in the while loop related section. So now observe here, getting the point. So now understand here, first time the n value will print here, and we are decreasing the n value. So once the n value is decreased here, now what we are doing here, we are checking the condition here, we are checking the condition. So what is the condition is going to check here, first it will print this particular 10 value, and later it will become 9, and 9 greater than, yeah, 9 greater than 0 we are checking here. So the condition satisfied. Once a condition satisfied, it will come to this particular loop, and it will print the n value, and it will decrease the n value. Getting the point. Again, it will check the condition. 8 greater than 0, 7 greater than 0, some like. It's keep on checking the conditions. In the certain level, the condition is going to fail. It will come out of this particular while loop here. And sorry, do while loop here. Okay. Let me run the same example. Now observe same output, but so we are getting the same output, but only what we need to understand here, in the while loop first we'll check the condition. Based on the condition satisfaction, it will enter into the while body. But in the do while, the first it will try to execute the body of the loop, and later it will check the condition. So this is only the difference between while and do while here. And here observe carefully, instead of defining this line number something like 9, now what we can do, here we can provide the same decrement operation here. So this also will do the same operation here. So instead of coming with one extra line here, at the condition level, we can come up with the increment operation here. Okay, so this is all about the simple example on the do while. So try to execute the multiple example on this do, so that you will get to know how this particular do while will is going to work here. Okay, so let me come up with one more example on this particular do while, so that we'll get to know how this particular do is going to execute here. Most of the example, whatever we are going to discuss here, all are example related to this. So we'll most of the time we'll come up with the numbers, and we'll try to execute the same here. Now you can see what we can do. So one more example we'll see here. Into I is equals to 1, I'm trying to define. Okay, so and n is equals to 5. Int I is equals to 1, n is equals to 5. Now what I'm doing here, I come up with this particular do, and inside this particular do, so simply I'm going to print this particular I value. After printing this particular I value, now what I will do, I I will check with this particular condition I plus plus less than or equals to n here. Now observe carefully. So what we are doing here? So incrementation and the condition we are doing at the while condition level. So these are all the values we are getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. So basically, if you observe carefully, n is equals to 5 and we come up with a equal operator, less than or equal operator. When we are trying to use this particular less than or equals operator, what happens internally? So it will satisfy the equal value here. It will satisfy the equal value. So if I'm not using this particular equal operator, it will come up with a one less than value, even though both the values are satisfied, but in the less than condition will return false here. Okay, so this is the simple example on the while loop here. Now we'll come up with a for loop here. So in the earlier example, we already identified the for loop here, but even though we'll come up with the one more time here, observe. So this is the syntax we are going to write for the for loop. This is the syntax we are going to write for the for loop here. And now what we will do, we'll come up with the initialization, and we'll come up with a condition and iteration. This is the particular syntax we are going to follow whenever we are trying to work with this particular for loop. So here the values that we are going to initialize, and what is the condition, like how many times this particular loop we want to execute or we want to repeat. So the condition we are going to write, and iteration we can come up with how many values we can increase. For the each iteration we are going to write the iteration statement here. And here what we will do, we are going to write body of this particular loop here. Getting the point? Body of this particular loop. Only we need to understand basically this is important here. Initialization, condition, and iteration here. So these three will play very important role whenever we are trying to whenever we are trying to work with this particular for loop. And what about this particular do while loop here? So here this is very important role. Whatever the condition we are going to write, the condition is going to play very important role in our do while as well as while here. Okay, so let me start the simple example on this particular while loop, and here only I'm going to write the while loop related example, sorry, for loop related example. And observe, and now just I'm trying to declare the n value, and I'm come up with a for loop here, and inside this particular for loop n is equals to 10. N is equals to 10 I'm trying to check, and here n greater than 0 condition I'm making, and n minus minus. So if you see, observe, whenever we are having some bigger value, getting the point, when we are trying to work with the bigger value, what is the condition we are using? Greater than condition. If the n value start with 0, we are going to use less than condition, and the iteration statement will come up with a increment. And because of this particular n value 10, now I'm trying to come up with a decrement here. Okay, and here only I'm going to write the single line statement here. So simple, whatever we used earlier, I'm going to use the same one here. Now observe here, when we are having single line statement here, so this is the way we can define the values here. So it started with the 10 and it is ended with the 1. Whenever the n value 0, it's coming out of this particular for loop here. So this section will call it as a initialization, and this particular section will call it as a condition, and this particular section will call it as a iteration here. So this is very important, we need to understand regarding this particular for loop, because this loop will play very important role whenever we are trying to work on the logical related example here. Getting the point? It will try to come up with the logical example, how we used like the dimensions related example, the 2D array, 3D array. Whenever we are trying to execute the statements here, we define the multiple this particular for loop statements, and the same way, based on this particular for loop here, we define the output also. We define the output also. So if you see the 3D array, we can understand here. Now if you see here, we are coming with a one loop, second loop, and a third loop here. Okay, these three loops are printing purpose. This is the values are printing, and we are printing to the next line. Again, we are coming with the next line. Observe how many loops we are using and how many values are printing here. So you can see, so this is the readable format here. So whatever the output we are making here, this is the readable format we are using here. Okay, this is important, we need to understand here. Getting the point. So here if you see, same thing, we are using the for loop here. So this is the initialization section, and this is the condition section, and this is the iteration section. But here if you see, we come up with a 0, I value 0, we are using the less than 3 condition, and we are increasing the value. And whenever we are come up with this particular do while, here we are using the greater than condition. Why? Because the n value some bigger value, n value some bigger value, and instead of increment, here we are using decrement operator. Okay, so this is only the difference between these two. Okay, now understand here how we can come up with the using comma here. So using this particular comma, how we are going to run one more example here. So observe, this is a one more example I want to define. Let me comment out this. And here if you see, into a comma b, okay, two values, the two variables I'm trying to declare here. And here what I'm doing here, so a is equals to 1 and comma b is equals to 4 here. So observe carefully. So this is the first example we are discussing with the comma, and now what we are doing here, we are trying to come up with two values initialization, a value as well as b value. Now you can see the condition I'm making a less than b, and here once a condition is completed, now observe carefully, a plus plus comma b minus minus. So see here how we are trying to increment the value. So it's like a iteration. The iteration block what we are doing here, we are trying to iterating two values. So a values as well as b values I'm trying to iterate. Now I want to print this particular a and b values here. So this is the a value, and this is we are going to print as a b value. Now you can see what is the a value we are initializing 1, and b value we are initializing 4, and we are checking the a less than b condition, and each iteration we are increasing the a value, and we are decreasing this particular b value here. So this is the one more example we are going to execute here. Now you can see a value 1, b value 4, a value 2, and b value 3, b value 3. So whenever the a value 3 and b value 2, so this condition will fail. This particular condition will fail here. How many times this particular loop is repeated? Only two times here. Getting the point? Only this particular loop is repeated two times. But what we need to understand, so this is the way we can come up with a multiple initialization, and this is the way we can come up with a multiple iteration. But we cannot come up with a condition. So it's not going to check multiple conditions. So it's going to check only one condition. Okay. So any questions on this particular comma related for loop example?
So here also is if we want to check where the condition is failing, can we remove the body and can we check like that before we saw?
Can you repeat again? I did not
No,
understand.
if we want to check where is the condition is failing, so can we remove the body?
So, for example, now you can see,
Okay.
so A value 3 and B value 2. Okay. So
Yes.
basically, this every in each iteration statement will work here, but only the problem, it will try to repeat the statement itself. It will not going to execute any body here. So we did not define any body. So it's keep on like repeating multiple times once this particular condition will up to the condition fail. So once it is condition fail, it will printing this particular values here. Okay, so we'll move on to the one more example here. So basically, so here we can remove this particular initialization section, like we can declare at the top level, and we can remove this particular iteration statement. So we can come up with inside the body or outside the body of this particular iteration statement. Only we can make this particular condition here. So if you see now what I'm doing here, so one more for loop, because we can, this for loop will give you the more understanding here. So because we may come up with the different ways we can run this particular for loop here. And now into I, I'm declaring the value, the variable I'm declaring it, and I come up with one boolean variable, something like done. I'm initial values I'm making as a false, and after this I value I'm initializing 0. And now you can observe carefully, the I'm not in like I'm not coming with the initialization section, so just I'm using the semicolon. And this is the condition I'm making, not operator I'm using here. Okay, so this not we already discussed in the earlier example, so it will work on the opposite way. If the if the value we are having true, it will become false. If the value we are having false, it will become true. Okay, not condition I'm making, and I'm not going to use any iteration statements as well. So now observe, so what I'm doing here, we are not defining the initialization and we are not defining the iteration. So but observe carefully, just I'm printing this, what is a I value. Okay, so I value I'm printing. Again, I'm checking one condition. If this particular I value, if this particular I value 10, now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make this particular whatever the boolean variable we declare as a, the variable I'm making as a true. Getting the pen. So if the I value is not 10, now what happens internally? It will keep on increasing the value. So now you can see I'm trying to increment the I value itself inside the body here. So this is the one different example here. Okay, so here we remove the initialization, only we are checking the condition. And here the iteration also we remove. The iteration we provided inside the body and initialization we provided outside of this particular for loop here. Okay, so this is also important here. This also is applicable whenever we are trying to come up with this particular example we'll run. Okay, so now you can see 0 to 10. Why I'm explaining this example, basically sometimes this particular value, so we may pass as a parameter to the method, or we may pass this, but we are going to initialize like before calling this particular for loop. Getting the point, this is also some ways it's applicable. And iteration, so sometimes we can write inside this particular body of this particular for loop here, and only we can check the condition. So now if you see, this condition is going to work as a do while here. Here if you observe carefully, just we are checking the condition. Just we are checking the condition here. And here also we are checking the condition. This iteration statement we can write in the body of this do while here. Otherwise, we can write at the condition level. But here, what we are doing here, the iteration statement we are defining inside the body, and only we are making the condition here. Okay, this is the another way to write the simple example on the for loop. And I'm going to write the one more example. So now you can think about this. Basically, so I'm trying to write with the semicolon. Sorry. So this is the initialization, and one more semicolon I'm trying to write for this particular, what we can call it as a condition as well as iteration. Now I'm trying to print the value. I'm trying to print the value here. Yes, tell me.
Sorry, I have a question. Sir, the first for loop, when is it failing, sir?
So
So
this is
I
you're talking about.
no 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 the example that you've just written for semicolon not done and semicolon.
Okay.
So I value will become 11, right? And it will go to for loop again, and then for
No. So if you observe carefully, initially I value 0.
mm-hmm.
So the condition will satisfy because we are making the done variable as a false. So we are using the not condition. So it will become true. Once it is true, we are going to print this I value. We are checking here. If the I value 10, no, I value still it is 0. So this particular condition will fail. Okay, and just it is increase the I value. Whenever the I value will become 10, this particular condition will satisfied. We are making this particular variable as a true. Whenever we are making this variable as a true, we are using the not operator. The not operator, what it will do? It will return false here. Getting the point? So I
Yes.
think you missed this. So this is we need. This is
Yeah.
very important here.
Uh,
It's going to stop the loop.
okay. Thank you.
Sir, before this not done, you wrote like this initialize and semicolon. So what are we initializing here?
So if we come up with this, what we are doing here? A is equals to 1, comma B is equals to 1. This
Yes.
statement where we define here outside of this particular loop. So the line number 23. Okay, and now you can see the A plus plus comma B minus minus. We are writing at the loop level, at the particular loop level. But what we are doing here, the I plus plus we are writing inside the body. Getting the point? The difference is here. So either we can write at the loop level or we can come up with this. But whenever we are trying to write in the body, so we need to define the semicolon here. After the semicolon, we are not going to write anything here. So the compiler will treat. So this is the body. It will try to look up the iterations here.
So we need to write that in line number 18 also.
Yes. So think about this. So for example, let me enable this. I'm not writing anything. Okay, let me comment on this also. We may get multiple times. Okay, if you see, so A value and the B value we declare line number 17 and we come up with line number 18 loop here. So what we are doing here, so A value and B value we are initializing and we are making some condition. Okay, I am going to remove the condition.
Mhm.
And here, so if you observe what happens here, whenever we are not repeating here, now we can think here. So this loop is not stopping here. You can see here. This will identify here. This particular loop is still is running.
Mhm.
So why it is running? Why this particular loop is not repeat like stopping here? You can see these are the values are printing like it's running more than 20 or 30 times here.
Yes.
Because A is always less than B.
Yes. So because these values are not modifying here. If you see A value we are getting 1 and B value 4. So every time we are getting the same values. If the values are modified, then only this particular condition will satisfy. But how the values are going to modify? So either you can write at the loop level or you can come up with a body. Okay.
Basically, the implementation part, we can just put it anywhere in the block of code so that it will stop when it comes to the incremental part, right?
Yes, when the condition is satisfied, it's going to stop the loop here. But mainly, either we can write the body or we can write this the loop body or it's for loop itself here. So these are the two cases we can write here. If you write outside of this also, it will not work.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let me see the one more example here. This is we'll call it as a infinity loop here. And here I'm not having any initialization, and now you can think here we don't have any condition and even we don't have any iteration statement here. So simply what I'm doing here, I'm going to print this particular star here. Observe carefully how many times this particular loop is going to repeat. The line number 30, whatever the loop we are writing here, this will repeat multiple times here because here we are not initializing or we are not having any condition and we are not having any iteration statements here. So you can see it's keep on printing the values here. This is we'll call it as a infinity loop because there is no stop here. Now you can think here it's keep on increasing the like printing the values here. So now you can see it's printed multiple times here. Okay, so this is one more example I want to explain here. Okay, any questions on recording this particular for loop? We come up with a different ways. Okay, so if we don't have here, now one more for loop we are having here. So basically, we are going to call it as a for each year. This particular for each loop we introduced in the 1.5 version onwards here. So how we are going to write. So observe carefully. This is also we are going to define the same syntax for, but here we are not going to work with the initialization, or we are not going to come up with any conditions here. So how we are going to write here? Basically, it will work on the collection of values, like it will work on the multiple values. It will try to repeat here. Okay, so if we observe, just we are going to write the type here. What is the data type we are having? Just we are going to write the type. And now this is we are going to call it as a itr variable. So like here we are going to declare the variable name here, and we are coming with colons here, two colons here. Okay, and here we are writing the collection of reference variable here. Observe, this is important here. This is the syntax here. Basically, what is the data type we are having? We are going to write, and what is the name of the variable? Just we are going to write the name of the variable, and this is the colon is important here, and this is the reference variable. The reference variable will contain the collection of elements here. Collection of elements here. So simple example, we'll understand here how this particular for each is going to work. Observe carefully. This is we'll call it as a for each here. So this is not the for loop here. Okay, for loop we come up with the initialization, condition, and iteration. But for each here, collection reference variable, normal variable we are going to define, and the data type we are defining, and between we are going to come up with the one colon here. Getting the point? This colon, it will try to get the current value from this particular collection here. So now observe how it is going to work here. So let's have a simple example. And here, now first we'll use the same example with like for loop, and later we'll try to execute the same example with the for each here. So int nums I'm defining, like I'm trying to come up with multiple values. So the easiest way to get the multiple values at this moment, what is the best one? Arrays. So arrays example is the best one. The arrays we can store multiple values here. Okay, now understand here. Now what I'm doing here, so here I'm trying to defining the value, something like some values I'm defining. These are all the values I'm trying to come up with a multiple. And later what I will do, int sum. The int sum I'm trying to come up with a 0. And again I'm going to use the same for loop here, and int I is equals to 0, and so I less than. So what is the condition we are having? Right now we don't have the proper condition here. So nums dot, I want to use this particular nums dot length here. Whatever the nums we are using, I'm making the nums dot length here, and so what we can do, I plus plus. Getting the point. Basically, instead of coming with a static value, so here we can write the length. So I less than 10 or I less than 12, something we can write. But in the most of the time in the real time scenarios, we are not going to provide the static condition. Getting the point. This is important. So whatever the condition we are going to make, so we'll try to define like this based on the length, based on the size. Getting the point. Based on the some values, we are going to make some conditions here. Okay, so this is important here. And after this particular loop here, now what I'm doing here, so I'm going to write sum plus is equals to num of I. Okay, and finally what we will do, we'll print this particular sum here. And this is the whatever the values we're having. This is the result of this particular all the values here. Getting the point? Just we are doing some addition on the how many elements we are having. We are trying to do the same addition. Now, if you observe the same example, I'm going to come up with for each year. So if you observe carefully, the first what we need to define. The first one, we need to define the data type. So what is the data type we can define here? Okay, we need to think here like what is a basically this is the we are having collection of elements, like it's like a multiple elements we are having, and this particular multiple elements having which data type here, that is called int here. And what is the data type we can define here? Int we can define. And what is a variable we can define? So that you can define any name here. So just I'm defining x here. Okay, so after the x we need to use a colon here. And what is a reference variable? So which contain the collection of elements here. So what is the reference variable we are having? That is called nums here. Getting the point? This particular nums is contain collection of elements here. So this is we'll call it as a for each syntax. Observe carefully. We are defining the data type, we are defining the variable name, and we are defining the variable like collection of variable name here. Okay. So after this, now what I'm doing here, I'm going to write the sum statement. Whatever the sum statement we are defining. So if you see here, I'm going to write. So where is the I here? Getting the point? Where this particular I is available, because we are not using indexes related information. Getting the one, we are not going to use any indexes related information. Basically, whatever the element, like whatever how many values we are having inside this particular values, the number of values for each iteration, it will store the one value into this particular x here. Each iteration, the value is going to store into this particular x variable. Okay, here we are not going to come up with any indexes related information, so we can remove this section and we can make only x here. We can make only x values here. Okay, if you observe, so if you see carefully, so this is the for loop related example. What we are doing is we are using the same reference variable, and inside that we come up with the indexes information. Getting the point? Whatever the this particular brackets we are using, this will try to come up with the indexes related information. But if you observe the differences between for each and for loop here, for loop basically internally based on the indexes information, we are loading the value. Whatever the value we loaded, we are adding into this particular sum. But here these nums contain the multiple values. For each iteration, the current value is going to store into this particular x. For example, first iteration will store 10, second iteration will store as a 20, and the third iteration will store as a 30. How it is going to check? This for each internally is implemented the index related information. Or once a first value is completed, it will move on to the second index location. Thus, this particular information is internally implementation completed inside this particular for each style for loop here. Getting the point? And based on the current value, we are doing the same, the sum of x here, and we are trying to print the particular sum value. So now if you see why we are getting different here, why we are getting 900 the second value, and why we are getting 450 as a first value? Any idea? So basically the second for each also it needs to print as a 450 only. Why it is printing as a 900? The double value why we are getting here?
Because the nums value is before it's giving 450.
Yeah, exactly. So it's starting with the 450 here. From the 450 again it is adding the 450 value. So it's become 900 here. So if you make the line number 10 the sum as a 0, so we may get 450 and 450 here. Okay, so we are not making as a 0. Whatever the 450 values we are getting, from the 450 only we are adding this particular values here. Okay, so this is all about the simple example on this particular for each year. And same way, so you can come up with a then value we can print, and we can come up with a sum here. So to print that, now what I'm doing here, so here I'm trying to use the two statements here, and now you can see, instead of printing this particular sum here, now what I will do, sorry, here I'm trying to print this particular value that is called x here. Now you can see whatever the value we are having, we are printing this, and we are doing sum of these particular values. But here, for each iteration, the whatever the x value we are getting, we are adding into this particular sum variable. Finally, we are printing this particular sum. So just for understanding, what is the x is containing here. Initially, x is containing 10. For the each iteration, the x value is modifying here. Now you can see what is the order we initialize here. The same order we are getting here. Getting the point? The order is not going to modify here. So this is important, we need to understand whenever we are trying to work with this particular for each example here. Okay, so along with this particular for each, now what we can do, we can add some break statements as well. So for example, now what I'm doing here, after this, so I'm going to check this particular loop, and if this particular x equals to something like 50, now what I will do, I'm going to use the break statement here. So whenever we are using this particular break statement, now observe the sum value is going to modify here. Now you can see only 5 iterations are completed. Only 5 iterations are completed here, and the total we are having as a 600. Earlier we are getting as a 900, now we are getting as a 600, because we are breaking this particular loop. Whenever the particular x value is equals to 50, we are stopping this particular loop here. We are not repeating more here. This is we need to understand here. Okay, so this is all about the simple example on this particular nums here. Sorry, the for each related example, and internally we come up with one of the arrays related example here. Okay, so any questions here? Okay, so if we don't have anything here, now what we will do, we'll try to write the nested loop. Basically, we already familiar with the nested related example. And one more example, I just want to provide how this particular nested is going to work here. Because when we are trying to work with the 2D dimension, 3D dimension, we already familiar with the nested related example here. Okay, but observe one more example I want to share. Int I comma j, I'm trying to declare the two variables here. And after declaring this, now what I will do, I'm going to use one loop. So I is equals to 0, and I less than 10. And now what I'm doing here, I plus plus. So after this, I'm going to use a one more loop here. So this, the line number 19, what is the loop we are calling here? That we'll call it as a nested loop here. And now you can see j is equals to, now what I'm doing here, I'm trying to start with I. Observe carefully, I'm not come up with a static value. Whatever the I value we are having, I'm trying to initializing into this particular j. This is important here. And after this, now what I'm doing here, again I'm trying to check this. Sorry, why I'm using this. So j less than 10, I'm making the condition, because I condition we are having same, and the same way we are having j condition, and now j plus plus. But what we need to understand here, this is very important, we need to understand the initialization. So I'm not come up with the j is equal to 0. Now how I'm coming here, whatever the I value I'm having, the I value I'm trying to store into this particular j. Getting the point? Now, so here I'm going to write print statement here, and inside this particular print statement, I'm trying to print star here. Only star I'm printing here. And after this, So empty println I'm printing. Getting the point? So observe how this particular example is going to print. Now you can think here how this particular values are printing. So understand here the way how we are printing here. From top to bottom, the top level we have some bigger values, and for each iteration the values is decreasing here. The value is decreasing here. Getting the point? Using this particular nested loop, as I explained earlier, we are going to come up with some logical programs here. The logical programs will contain something like, getting the point? This is also very important, we need to understand here. Okay, but now if you observe carefully, I'm going to put the break statement here and I'm trying to run in the debug mode. So we'll get to know how this particular I and j values are working internally. Now I value 0. And what about this particular j? J also having 0. So when this particular j is having 0, now what happening internally? At the first time we are printing one star here. Once we star, we print here. Now what happens internally? So the j value is increasing. Once the j value is increased, what happens internally? J value 1. Once a j value 1 here, this condition we are checking. The condition is going to satisfy here. Okay. Once this particular j value condition is satisfied, we are moving into the nested loop, not the outer loop here. So this is very important here. Okay, nested loop is repeating how many times, as well as the outer loop is repeating how many times. So now you can think here. So both are repeated one time. Now the j value is repeating second time. Nested loop is repeated second time and the third time. Okay, fourth, fifth. Okay, now you can see it's keep on repeating until around 9 times here, or we can call it as a 10 times. 0 to 9, it has become 10 times. Getting the point? The nested loop is repeated 10 times. Now you can see, so now it will not repeat more here. It will go to the outer loop here. So observe, whenever this particular loop is, the condition is fail, what happening internally? We are printing the next line, the empty next line we are printing, and we are moving into the outer loop here. Okay, if you see, it will go to the outer loop. Now I value will become 1. Whenever I value will become 1, what about the j value? J value also same here. Again, the j value is not going to start with a 0. Again, the j value is not going to start with a 0. The j value is going to start with a 1 here. So if you see I value 1 and j value 1, you can see in the right side section, the variable section, we can see I value 1 as well as the j value 1 here. Okay, so now from the j value 1, again it will try to increasing here. So 1 to 10 times. Okay, now you can see. So it's printing the empty println. Again it's moving into the I. Again the j value and I value will be, it's going to start with the 2. So again the j loop will, it will repeat from the second onwards until the condition fail here. Okay, so now you can see. So this is a way the values are printing internally here. This is we need to understand very carefully. So now remove this. Finally, this is the format we are getting here. Okay, so you can imagine the nested loop is going to play very important role compared to this particular outer loop. If the outer loop repeated 10 times, the nested loop will repeat 100 times here. Getting the point? This is important here. Okay, so any questions on this particular for loop here?
So, sir, if we want to print the just opposite for format, so we can do decrease I minus minus or j minus minus. Am I
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. And if we want to print like we want to start from the 1 star and after the middle, again I want to write the same loop, same format. So for that, I think I'm not sure, but please tell me, do we need to add one more for loop?
Can you repeat again?
No, if we want to start from 1 star, we want to start the format from 1 star.
Okay.
We want to like if we write, we want we can I want to write the same format one more time from starting the opposite format with this one.
Opposite means I did not understand. So you are going to start with
So
0 and
yeah, I'm going to start with the star 1. After star 2, star 3, star 4. Then star 9, star 10, again star 8, star 7, like this.
okay, got it. So basically, so you are going to increase from here and again you are going to decrease here. This is you are talking about. So like so it will start 0, 1, 2 and 3 and it will move on to the 10. Again it will try to decrease the values. You're talking about this? Okay, just message me. So what exactly you are trying to think so we can look about that. Or you can try to try the simple example using this nested loops. So if you are not able to do, just let me know. We'll try to resolve the issue. Okay, so we'll start the jump statement tomorrow. Once we familiar with the jump statement here, so the basic related example we completed here. Now we'll try to add one written statement here. So these are all the basic example here. So like only with the simple topic is pending, that is called jump statement, like a break and continue statement here. We'll have a basic example on the break and continue. Once we familiar with the break and continue, we'll move on to the introducing the classes here. So what are all the fundamentals about the classes and how we can come up with the object creations and instance variable creation, local variable creation. So this we are going to discuss in the tomorrow session here. Okay, so just try with a simple example on the nested loops and while loop and do while loop. And if you are having any questions, please let me know. We'll try to discuss in the tomorrow session. Okay, so if we don't have anything, we'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you.